Hello guys, welcome to Redditor's Revenge. Here we post amazing revenge stories daily. And if you want more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel and stay tuned with us. Now, let's begin today's story. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood had its ups and downs. For one, you don't feel the societal pressure of doing rich people stuff, but at the same time, there are differences in the class itself that sometimes made me a bit embarrassed when my classmate had a nicer thing, or his parents lived in a slightly nicer house. Among everything though, my best friend Alan and I 19M were always there. Alan was my best friend and next-door neighbor. We went to the same school and his mom and my mom were good friends. Alan was in the exact same situation as us, middle class but sometimes struggling with money, so just on the edge of the middle class. His mom didn't work while his dad worked in real estate, but he wasn't very big. Because we were so close money-wise, we had fun in our own way. Riding bikes was an essential part of our daily life and we made our own fun. We never felt like we were lesser than anybody else, and we always had the same big dreams of one day making it big. Alan was a little bit more ambitious than me, though. He always talked about being rich and what he'd do with the money. He was adamant about one day being able to ride fancy cars and live in a big house, and he didn't really care where the money came from. He always joked about robbing banks to make money. Despite everything, though, we shared every single thing. Because we were both only children, we were like each other's brothers and never felt selfish. This went all the way from elementary to high school. Fast forward to college, though, and things took a turn. Now we are both 19 and in the second year of college. All throughout the first year, Alan's dad was abroad on business and it seemed like it was big. I supported Alan the entire year as he missed his dad, and his dad kept promising that he'd come back in a big way, and he did. One day, I got a phone call from Alan telling me that he was taking me to some super fancy restaurant, and I had no idea how he'd pay. We sat down and after some back and forth about the money, he finally told me how. Apparently, his dad made some insane business deals during that year he was away, and it got him a ton of money. Alan's dad coming back literally turned the family 180 degrees towards wealth. Alan told me that they were buying a new car and planning on moving to a new house because of this change. I was so happy for him, even if I felt just a tiny bit envious. He told me that no matter what, though, nothing would change and we'd always be tight. I believed him. At college, though, things began changing. Alan got a new car and as soon as he did, he shot his way to popularity. In college, it was just me and him, but as soon as he started driving and dressing, the different cliques started taking an interest in him, and he started hanging out with the elite and fraternity trust fund kids. It was still pretty early on, but I got the hint one day when we had made plans to hang out, and after leaving a million messages, I called him and it seemed like he was in some big social event with so many voices around him. He told me that he was out with friends and immediately hung up. This was unusual for him, but I excused him the first time. This started happening a lot though. Another time, I had invited him over to my family's house during spring break as this was a tradition, but he told me that he would be going on vacation with some of the guys from college. I told him to delay it by one day, as we always did this, but he kept refusing and told me that he'd rather go because it's more fun. I again understood where he was coming from, and told him that I was fine with it. Things got way worse around Thanksgiving though. Every Thanksgiving, Alan's family and my family came together for dinner. We had done it every single year ever since we met in kindergarten, and my family took it very seriously. I didn't even have to ask him because it was such a long tradition that we just knew he'd show up with his parents. On the day itself though, I didn't see Alan all day in college and he skipped his classes. I kept calling him but he didn't pick up. I went home, as our university was in the same city and his parents had already shown up. We kept waiting for an hour with the food outside and none of us had no idea where he was, and when he finally picked up he just nonchalantly told us sorry, but that he had an important outing and he had to go. Me, my family, his parents were absolutely furious. When I did confront him about this later, he acted as if he did nothing wrong. He told me that everyone was going to this fancy new party and that he had to go. I gave him a piece of my mind, but he literally didn't care and told me that I was being too dramatic over nothing, and that I should have just spent it with my family. I got genuinely angry and just let him be. The interesting thing is that Alan never introduced me to his new troupe of friends, and even though they were all he talked about when we went out, I never met them. On the rare occasions when we did go out, he'd go on for hours about who did what and who traveled where, And that Johnny's dad is the owner of what, or Jenny's mom is the entrepreneur of what. It became so annoying, and I just ignored most of what he said about these people. He was literally obsessed with hanging out with them so much that he had forgotten everything else we were interested in, like video games, movies, comics, etc. Anytime I'd tell him about the new movie or game or whatever, he'd act like it was such a childish thing, and he just kept on going about whoever's Bitcoin endeavors. For 2 months, anytime I'd tell him to go out or anything, he'd first check if his other group of friends were free or not. Let me see if the guys are doing anything first was his default answer to anything. It's not like he was busy in the first place. No, he would be completely free, but after I asked, he'd ask the other guys if they were doing anything so he'd have the option. I became their literal backup to him and just the guy he hung out with if everyone else was busy. It became so infuriating when you'd make a plan and suddenly he'd cancel because the others came up with something. I confronted him once and told him that he was just being a douchebag and that I'm not interested in playing second fiddle or backup to anyone. I told him that if he wanted to talk or hang out, he should tell me, and that I don't care about spending time anymore. He kept arguing about how I was being overdramatic again, but eventually, he invited me to the first outing with these people, and the first time I actually saw them. It was some outing in this fancy minimum charge place. I walked in as if I was meeting the royal family. Everyone was dressed in expensive clothes and had Mercedes and BMW keys on the table, but I could also smell the weed on half of them. He introduced me, and as soon as he did, I could feel them eyeing me up and down. They wasted no time in asking questions like what car I drive or where I live or what my dad did. Anytime I'd answer with the middle-class truth, I could see some of them laughing behind their teeth, including Alan. During the whole outing, everyone was flexing their money and their stuff. All of a sudden, Alan joined in and made fun of less fortunate people. They kept making fun of random cars in the street for how cheap they were, and in the middle of the conversation, someone asked me what car I drive and Alan jumped in, mockingly saying that I still take the bus. They laughed and I felt really embarrassed. Most of their conversations were like this and it was getting extremely annoying. I couldn't take it anymore and just excused myself. When I got home, Alan called me and asked me what was wrong, and told me that it was rude for me to just storm off like that. And I told him that I found offense in what they and he said, and he kept apologizing, but lately, his apologies had been becoming far less convincing and just came off condescending. He told me that he'd make it up to me and asked me to hang out the following day. Things got even worse. We kept hanging out in the mall where he had to enter every single store and look for stuff. In one store, he kept offering to buy me this expensive watch as a peace offering, and I kept refusing. He kept offering it in such a condescending way and ultimately told me that he wants to buy it for me because he knows I can't afford it. People were literally watching around us and it was very embarrassing, so I told him that I wasn't interested and that the amount of money he was spending on things like that watch wasn't making up for the decency he was continuously losing. I told him not to call me to hang out again and just left. I literally called his father when I got home and told him that Alan wasn't invited to the family picnic we were having the following week. And when he asked me why, I told him the whole thing. He got angry at his son and told me that he would fix things. That night, Alan came over with a pie and begged for forgiveness in front of my parents, so I couldn't treat him badly. He kept pressuring me to go out to have the water under the bridge, and even though I kept refusing, he was insistent, and we went out to this simple cafe. I didn't want anything fancy, but while we were walking on the way from the car to the cafe, we ran into that same group of friends he always hung out with. They were like parasites who just invited themselves in and hung around without anyone asking them. They were talking about their usual fake nonsense until they started a new round of showing off. They asked us why we were there, and Alan mockingly told him that I got angry at him and called his parents, to which they laughed. It was like their appearance triggered something in him, and he went back to talking about money, and they even started planning a vacation together without me. Just like the car last time, the group again kept asking me personal questions about myself and my family. Alan kept cutting in to tell them that my father was a plumber, but he kept saying it in such a disrespectful way that a couple of them laughed, which infuriated me. They were again all laughing, and Alan started telling childhood stories that proved that I wasn't the most fortunate kid, and brought up the car and house thing again. By the end of the outing, Alan had gone full-on villain mode and was making fun of my lack of a car, my small house, my fake watch, and so much more. He was enticing and they were laughing to the point where I got up from my seat, slapped him right across the face in front of everyone who was completely shocked at the sight, and left. I had had enough and decided to take my own revenge. I wanted to hit him in his most sensitive area, his car. His dad had just gotten him this new Camaro car, so I waited until I was sure that no one was around at 1 a.m. and I took the car and completely totaled it. It looked like an accident, but the car was completely gone and I felt joy in breaking every single inch from it. It was parked in the garage while he was with his compatriots till 3 a.m. Once I found the parking lot open and nobody was inside. I kept thinking but decided not to forgive him, and I took a tire iron I found in the parking lot and went to town in the car, but I made it look like an accident. What happened next I heard later. When he came back to his parents, he was clearly on weed and the car was destroyed. They assumed that he was the one who ruined it and they massacred him. They told him no more cars and they cut his allowance and basically said no more money, which made him angry and he lashed out at them, so they kicked him out. I found this out when he showed up at my doorstep asking me to spend the night in, and he told me what happened and that he had literally no money in his pocket to go to a hotel or anything. It was heavily raining, too, and I flat out refused and shut the door. I have no idea how he fared that night, but I didn't care. In college, I suddenly found him taking the bus again, as he no longer had a car. One day, though, his new friends saw him getting off the bus at college, and even though I was standing far away, I could still feel the bullying energy they unleashed on him. It got so bad that he was coming to me asking to borrow money for lunch, and took it as an opportunity to lecture him on how inconsiderate he was. Despite all this, there was still one more trick up my sleeve that I wanted to use and waited for the right moment. Alan even asked me for money a few times and I made up some excuses twice of the 3 times and flat out refused. I didn't know where he was even living, but I didn't care in the slightest. I knew that he would be back at his house for the weekend. My biggest plan was to call his posh friends and invite them to some party. I sent out notes to them at college as if they were coming from him, inviting them to his house. All I had to do was wait. I showed up at his house early and pretended that I had forgiven him and that I was trying to make amends. Suddenly, a bunch of his friends showed up all hyped and asked him about the party. He was confused and told them that there was no party. He started explaining that his parents cut him off and that his car was ruined. All of a sudden, they started doing the same horrible mocking they did of others to him. They awkwardly looked at each other and told him that he was of no use anymore and that they were not going to pay for him or give him rides. I could tell that he felt embarrassed and they treated him so badly and condescendingly and left. As soon as they left, he looked back at me and I couldn't help but smirk. I told him that he had been a douchebag for the past few months and that this was just karma. He told me that his parents told him that he had to move out and that they're still refusing to give him any money. I told him that I wouldn't help him and that he needed to learn his lesson. Over the next few weeks, I saw Alan taking the bus again every day. And at college, the same clique that he used to hang out with was now eyeing him and laughing every day, just like they did with others. He had become the victim of his own bullying and it seemed that it was really getting to him. The looks and the laughing got so bad that he intentionally kept walking away from them to avoid the mockery. Now, here we comes to the end of today's story, and I hope you guys are enjoying my daily content. So before leaving, I want to hear your thought about this story in the comments section, and what's your opinion about OP's douchebag friend, and the revenge OP and Karma took on him. Also hit the like button, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay tuned with us for more satisfying revenge stories.